Nice to see you all, at least in my mind. I spoke to a woman only a couple of hours ago, and she was crying. She was despairing because she had no children, had just lost a marriage, didn't have a lot of friends, felt like she hadn't accomplished anything in her life. In fact, she said, "I feel like I'm just a big fat loser." I have no idea why this thought came into my mind, but I said, yesterday Robin Williams hanged himself. She paused. She was trying to figure out what that had to do with her despair. Robin Williams had everything that this woman was discouraged and despairing because she didn't have. Didn't have any children. He had 3. Wasn't married. He's married, or he was. Hadn't accomplished anything. Could you do more than this guy? He's been everywhere, been on every stage in the planet. Couldn't have more stuff. Didn't work. A family spokesperson said that he'd been battling depression of late. Nah, he's been battling depression, my guess would be, from the time he was probably in his early teens. People who have really crappy lives and who turn that into depression as opposed to anger and other things, that's usually when it comes on. And the spokesman said, "This is a tragic and sudden loss." Wrong again. Tragic, yeah, but sudden? No, not really. It's been going on forever. He was 63 years old, 1 year older than me. He checked himself into rehab in early July of this year. In the words of the press release, I love press releases, they always make things sound less, like of late, like his whole life. He entered rehab in early July. He's been in and out of rehab his whole life, really, for alcohol and drugs. Not sudden. Eventually you get tired of the pain. You get tired of fighting. You get tired of trying. Somebody I love sent me a message, somebody I know well, and said, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," which is a phrase that he used in Dead Poets Society, and then told me that he died. That was the first notice I had of it. And it's somebody that I know well enough that I know that he too has struggled with depression and pain all of his life. It's something that I suffered from for, 30 plus years. It's unbelievably painful to be depressed and discouraged and despondent. And I said to this particular man who wrote me the message, "You and I know exactly why he killed himself. He had more money, fame, power, recognition, attention, praise than any 20 people could handle, but eventually it was never enough. And I know what that feels like. I can't know exactly his circumstances, but it's a pretty common pain. And those who've had it know exactly how it feels. And those who haven't have no idea what you're talking about." Do you ever watch him? This man could do extemporaneous comedy better than anybody I've ever seen. Extemporaneous, meaning no script, no teleprompter, no nothing. He was over the top. He was brilliant, very spontaneous, very creative. But go back and look at some of his clips, especially when he's like being interviewed on a talk show like Letterman or whatever. When he's just talking off the top of his head and he's not working off a teleprompter, his comedy is all about look at me, look at me, look at me, and look at me again. And in his later years, his comedy was getting darker. It was getting more sexually vulgar. it was obvious that he was declining. He just couldn't keep it up anymore. Johnny Carson said that when he was entertaining, it was the only time he felt worthwhile. I don't think it's really hard to guess, not much of a guess, that it was the same with Robin Williams. Once you get really good at something like he did, like entertaining, whoever sees you, all they see is your talent, your money, what you can do for them. People who are very talented, people who are very wealthy, people who are extraordinarily beautiful. Nobody sees you. And then you're alone. So you go out and you entertain another audience of 1,000 or 2,000 people like he did. He could schedule a gig in any city, anytime he felt like it. Imagine being his agent. Well, we'd like to book Robin Williams in your, Coliseum. They'd book him. But then by the time he gets back to the limousine, he's alone. Again, becomes too much. So what a cautionary tale, huh? Well, if only I was better known, if only I had more money, if only he had all the if onlys. I got to a place in my life where I had all the if onlys. They don't mean anything. This lady that I was talking to said, that seems a little severe to say that they mean nothing. No, they really mean nothing. Without unconditional love, they mean nothing. With unconditional love, well, it's fun to play. It's fun to have a nice vacation once in a while. That stuff can be fun. But without it, wow, it's really hollow. And they all become addictions. So he wasn't just addicted to alcohol and drugs. He was addicted to attention and approval and praise and power. And it just went on and on. And now he's not in pain. And it's the whole mission of my life to help people see this before they hang themselves. Some of us can, some can't. And I don't know why. Why some people absolutely are beyond reach, but you don't have to be. So it was kind of a sobering moment. Some of his movies were among my favorite ever. But his misery finally overcame him. But we're not here to talk about misery. We're here to talk about how to be happy. Just kind of touched me earlier today. One of the members wrote and said, this morning when I was remembering what you told me this weekend, Real Love Weekend here, you told me that I matter. And I realized something. Whenever I hear you or other people say to me that I have no effect on them, for example, you can't make me happy or sad. I love how I get misquoted because that's not quite what I said. Or I need nothing from you. What I hear is, you don't matter to me. So help me understand how to hear that differently, because that's what it meant to me. So how do you matter to me? Because I love you. Because I love you. Not just people generically, you. I enjoy loving you unconditionally. It's fun. You have become a significant part of my life. Well, you can translate all that into, you matter to me. That's what I mean. In addition, you can add to my happiness. Now, I'm already happy. So you don't make me happy. You don't make me sad. And yet, you can add to my happiness simply by your existence, simply by my loving you. And so you matter. You don't want to make me happy or make me sad. That's a foolish power you don't want. Way better to just simply matter. I choose to feel your soul. I choose to enjoy your happiness. I choose to enjoy loving you. See all the different ways that I'm saying, in other words, you matter. You ask a second question. Let me know if I answered that one. Can you give me a nutshell version of your philosophy on confidentiality? Because I'm uncomfortable that you revealed a guy we'll call him Fred, just to be confidential. Fred's deep secret to an entire room of people. At first you said the example anonymously, but then you later revealed that it was Fred. My concern is that I think he would be devastated and damaged if it ever got back to him what you did. So I'm wondering why you did that. So, number one, lots of people know this guy. Lots of people hear his story. He shares that particular story with a lot of people. It was not news. It was also a great teaching example. In the particular group I was in, you and only one other person know him. The odds that anybody else would run into him are very small, but that wouldn't excuse breaking a confidence if indeed it was. And he gave me his permission to use his life as an example to help anybody else. So 1, 2, 3, I wasn't breaking a confidence. And I don't. Now, further about confidentiality. If you go to a group of people and you tell a story about yourself, the odds that it's going to stay confidential are pretty small. They're pretty good, actually, in real love groups. I've been doing this for a long time, and confidences are violated fairly infrequently. But it happens. If you go to 12-step meetings, they actually take a vow of sorts of confidentiality. And I went to my first AA meeting ever and told people I was a drug addict, and the entire town of Rome, Georgia knew about that within about 6 minutes. So I decided a long time ago that I'd rather tell the truth and feel free than keep my life secret. And boy, I paid a big price for telling the truth about myself. A story for another day. Here's a member who says, last time, I think it was on Tuesday night, you commented that service was not love. Would you expand on the consequences of that difference for both sides of the issue? I'm not sure what the other side is. Seems like it would be useful and more to learn. So service can be selfless. Service can be a part of loving. So if I love you unconditionally, I can actually do that from here without ever meeting you and never do a single thing for you other than love you. And that's without us ever speaking. So with no overt action on my part, I can love you unconditionally. But if we spend time together and I give you my time, I give you my love, I'm serving you, and service then can be a part of unconditional love. But service by itself doesn't necessarily mean loving. So service can be selfless or not, or there could be a combination of selfless and selfish. It can be very sneaky. I attended a real love group meeting once, small meeting at a university, in fact, in some room. I don't remember why it was there. And the group proudly brought in a woman who they described with beaming smiles would be the exception to the general rule that I've spoken, which is that very few people have been unconditionally loved from birth or raised with it, and very few people are unconditionally loving. So they brought in this woman proudly as an example of loving. They introduced her essentially as Mother Teresa. She walked in, she sat down, said hello. Within 2 seconds, before she'd even sat, I had easily determined that she was not loving, not unconditionally loving. And so I just asked her a couple of questions, which she was happy to answer. And then I said, I can still remember this. How's your relationship with your husband? Wow, whoa, the room was not ready for this. Her entire face changed, like she'd been possessed by a demon. And she used some expletives and cursed him and said he never appreciates anything he does. And then I thought, well, this is fun. Let's make it worse. So I said, so does anybody else really appreciate all the things that you do for them? This is a lady who's always the one who runs the bake sale. She always brings the fresh loaf of bread, to the funeral, the baby shower, the everything. She was Miss Service for the East Coast of the United States. She wore a crown that said so. It turns out, boy, she was just madder than a hornet because nobody ever appreciates her. She's always doing this stuff for people and nobody does anything for her. And these poor people in the group wish they hadn't brought her because they didn't know. So here's a woman who certainly served a lot, but she served so people would like her. So service isn't necessarily love, but it is often part of loving. That's all. I got a call recently from somebody that I was coaching. He was 4 minutes late to his call. I didn't say anything. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. If it's your first time, whatever. He started right off making excuses. Well, I was doing this and I heard there was going to be a tornado and the lunar phase. He just went on and on with excuses. Still, I didn't say anything. Then he started attacking me, doubting whether our work together was doing any good. Still, I didn't speak. It was like watching a brush fire go out of control. He paused, I think mostly to breathe, and I finally said, do you realize that from the first second that we've been speaking, well, actually that you've been speaking, you've been defending yourself from hello. You've been defending yourself vigorously and with every word. Predictably, he defended himself some more, so I said nothing. Finally, I said, are you feeling happy or unhappy right now? He started to blame me for it, and I said, happy or unhappy? Well, I said, I'll make this easier for you. You're not happy. In fact, you're very unhappy. So the question is, do you want to stay unhappy? In which case, you won't need me to be on the call with you. You can do that by yourself. Or would you like to change that? Well, would you be willing to entertain changing that? Well, okay. So let's change it right now. I said, what was your first sentence in this conversation? He couldn't remember. His head was spinning 100 miles an hour. I said it was something defensive about being late. I don't remember if at the time I could recall the sentence. So I said, how about if we start over? Let's just start the conversation all over again. You hang up and call me back. So he called back and I said, say this after me. I was irresponsible and I did not do what it took to be on time. I was wrong. The entire conversation changed after that. Once you start defending, your whole body, it's like PTSD. You go on high alert. Your neurons, no kidding, physiologically demonstrated, your neurons are hyperactive. And then you keep defending. Once you're all hypervigilant, every sentence becomes a threat. It gets worse and worse. So it can often be very useful just to stop. Just stop. Change where the conversation's going. Change your perspective. Change your attitude. Find somebody to love you. Whatever. We're really not in charge of our random thoughts. So still, after all these years of practicing, you'd think I'd have loving down, but I don't. And I'll be somewhere and a thought will enter my head. An unkind thought, an angry thought, a vengeful thought, an ugly thought. Well, it doesn't take long to go from one ugly thought to two. So now, right about the end of the first thought, before I get to the second one, out loud, wherever I am, I say, no, I'm not going there. Because I already know where this goes. It just goes straight downhill. Now, it sounds like a technique. Maybe. I'm consciously choosing not to feed that thought. Because if I feed the negative thought, which by the way is always a lie, if I feed it, oh, well, then I turn it into 20. And once I have 20 negative thoughts, now I will feel fearful, angry, whatever. I choose to stop it, as we did in the conversation with this man. And it worked beautifully. We had a lovely conversation after that. We just had to change the direction. Here's somebody who says, Saturday night, my relatively new upstairs neighbor had a party, most of which took place outside on their balcony, which is right above my bedroom. By 11:30 p.m., they showed no signs of stopping, and I usually go to bed at 10. I weighed my options. I could have asked them to be quieter. I decided that probably wasn't going to do any good since there was alcohol involved. Call the police. I ended up putting in some earplugs and I went to bed. At some point, the noise stopped, but I don't really know what time it was. I was angry and feeling victimized by these inconsiderate people. I have huge expectations that neighbors should be more considerate, especially in condos where we're right on top of each other. When I got up the next morning, I opened the back door to my patio and found it covered in food, dust, cigarette ashes, and strangely, dripping paint. Somebody had spilled a red drink that ran down onto my porch fan and a chair. Somebody had flicked cigarette butts onto the sidewalk. I was livid. Got my broom, paint remover, brushes, rags, hose, cleaned up the mess. Strange as it seems, the more I cleaned, the less annoyed I felt. I just stopped fuming, did the job, and the patio looked really nice when I finished. So I got a question. I'm undecided as to whether to mention the party. I can't find anything in our condo regulations that says anything about noise on balconies after a certain hour. I hate confrontation. Actually, I'm afraid of confrontation, to be more truthful. Unless it becomes a regular occurrence, I'm tempted to leave it alone. I also haven't checked into the county noise ordinances, so I'm sorting out choices so that I don't feel helpless. Honey, this is really lovely what you've done. Cleaned up the mess, you got less angry. Now you are sorting out choices. Oh, that's so much more productive than being livid, stomping upstairs and beating somebody up, which at your age would be more dangerous for you than for the neighbors. Go to the condo association, call somebody, and find out what their position is on noise. It may not be written, or it may be written in a place that you don't have, and get their suggestion about what to do next time. Now, notice my tone. It's not so much what you do here, it's how you feel about it. It's just taking the next step. Then you can do this next step if you want to or not. You go upstairs and you describe what happened. Make sure they're sober. Wait a day or two. No anger. Ask them if they could be more careful with future parties. We have a neighbor on one side, and they're just delightful neighbors. They take good care of their place, but I don't know, 2 or 3 times a year, they have a grand Latin wedding, and whoa, there are trumpets and noise and singing and laughing, and it gets really loud. And he asked me about it one day, and I said, I don't care. It sounds like you're having fun. Because it only happens once in a while. I did ask him, kind of like you would ask your neighbor, I said, when your neighbors park all up and down the street, they tend to park on my lawn, which has sprinkler heads and breaks the heads, and then I have to repair them. So, that would be nice. He said, not a problem. But see, I wasn't annoyed. Now, what if they give you grief? Because some people will. Some people will defend themselves no matter what. It doesn't matter what you say. They're already in defense mode, like the man I was telling you about who was late. So now you're prepared to tell them what the condo association said. And sometimes that's enough. People who behave in this way, they don't realize they're doing it, but it's a kind of emotional bullying. And they tend to be defensive. And if you let them know there's a consequence, sometimes they quit it. So if it's a one-time thing, yeah, I would let it go. If it happens again, I'd go up earlier before everybody's drunk and ask them to quiet down. And then if they don't, first do whatever the condo association said. If that doesn't work, you just call the cops. That's what the police are there for, is that kind of thing, to protect and serve. And baby, you got an example. If they drop debris, you take pictures. You take it to whoever manages the condos and ask them what to do. Or you take it to the cops, or you take it to small claims court. But you don't have to put up with this. Believe me, condo managers and cops have been through all this before. They've heard it 1,000 times. I discovered on apparently more than one occasion when the kids were teenagers and I would go out of town that there were some lively parties here at the house. I had a guy delivering rock to my driveway, I don't know, a couple of months ago. And he said, I've been to your house a bunch of times. And I'm thinking, before I lived here, he said, oh no, you guys used to have the greatest parties. He named one of my children. And apparently the neighbors used to have to call the cops on the kids. How I never found out about most of these. I'm not quite sure if the cops were involved. But that's what rules are for. That's what policemen are for, is to help you out. And you don't have to put up with it. But you're already ahead because you're not all mad about it. It's very cool. Here's a woman who says, I've seen the full horror now, finally, of how badly my mother crippled the real me. Should have seen it sooner. Yeah, she really did, and so do most parents. But see it sooner? How in the world could you have seen that by yourself? The way she raised you is the whole world, so for what reason would you have questioned it? What 4-year-old says to their parents, to his or her parents, you know, I've been wondering if you're using the right methods for raising me. I've been wondering about that little tone in your voice, whether that's really loving or not. There isn't a chance in this world a kid would come up with a question like that, because the world they're in is the only world they know. You said, I was never meant to be boring and shy and fearful, but through a succession of comments throughout my life, she molded me into an extension of herself and what she valued. And now, specifically today, I was believing that's who I really am. I was believing that I'm worthless because I can now see the extent of the damage. And I'm kind of wondering, you've seen this all along, haven't you? Yeah. It's very often true. When we realize something about ourselves, we're the last people to see it. So none of this is news to me. And yet, I find you easy to love. Delightful, really. You're just beginning to see glimpses of who you really are. Why did it take this long? Who cares? Just keep getting glimpses. You said it also scared me because there must be loads more I don't yet see. Oh, there's always loads more. Every once in a while, people will say, so what do you see in me that I'm not seeing? And inside my head, I'm thinking, you're not ready for a 12-gauge shotgun. So I'll pick a thing, which is about all anybody can handle. You just work on the next thing. Who cares if there's a lot? As long as you're not alone, as long as you've got a guide, as long as you've got somebody who loves you and will hold your hand while you figure this out, what's the hurry? I mean, it's fun just having your hand held. So if you figure something out in addition, all the cooler. You said, I've been horrified by the way I see her do the same things she did to me to my 8-year-old niece and 4-year-old nephew. It's like staring at my own childhood. I don't think I need to save them. I'm frankly in this moment too selfish to, but I see me in them. And my brother and his wife do the same things to their children too, the same 8-year-old and 4-year-old. It's kind of a nightmare, isn't it? Parents distort their children. Your parents distorted their children, you and your brother. And now they're continuing the same pattern with their grandchildren, and their children are continuing the same pattern with their children. What a rut, what a mess, what a cycle. And I've seen this in family after family. I can still remember a lady telling me a story, and she swears it's true. German family she came from. And her father disowned his son, her brother, for using drugs. Turns out that the father had been disowned for not going to church where his father, her grandfather, preached. His father had been disowned for going to a different church from his father. It turned out that at least 5 generations in a row involved a father disowning his son. Crazy. I get to watch family patterns all day long and hear about the kids and the parents and the grandchildren, the grandparents and the uncles and the aunts. It's a lunatic asylum being run by the inmates. You said, I saw my mom today and I was tired, so I should have just canceled. But instead, I decided to mentally count the number of times. This is mean. That she mentioned how I looked, how she looked compared to others, how others looked compared to her and me, and she reached 21 comments about how other people looked within 1 hour. That kind of brainwashing was eye-opening. 21 in an hour. That's diligent. Now, just for a moment, imagine the effect that 21 times in an hour, not just about your appearance, but 21 times in an hour about everything about you. Imagine what that would be like when multiplied by thousands of hours when you were a child. Horrifying. You said, so I'm still growing. I was just stunted for over 4 decades, and now I get to resume the childhood I was meant to have. The kind you described in your boot camp, where your grandchildren can have butter smeared all over their face and wander freely without a mother even hovering anxiously or saying anything, or telling her children not to touch anything, or smile nicely, or pull her dress down, or eat like a lady, or answer for her, or boast to everybody about her looks and accomplishments. It wasn't love, my childhood. It was a puppet show. Yeah, and it really is. Have you ever seen those, what are they, the puppeteers, the guys who have the dummy, and they have their hand shoved up the dummy's backside? Most of us were raised like that, with our parents' hands shoved up our backsides, manipulating us just like dummies. You said, I was the marionette, and she often did the speaking for me because she didn't approve of what I said. It didn't make her look good enough. So I learned not to speak up, and I got by on my looks and my academic ability. So I never developed a personality. But that's not who I am. No, it's not. And you don't have to feel bad about it. Could, but what a waste. You just didn't know. You say, I've been asleep. And now, because I've been trusting the love from you, I've been awakening enough to start seeing things more clearly. This will go on for the rest of my life. Just because I can't see things now doesn't mean that I'm worthless or incompetent. It just makes me human. Yep. Actually, it makes you pretty darn cool that you had the courage to face this, because most people never will. And most was a euphemism. It's way more than most. You said, with continued trust, I will develop the personality I was born to have, even though it was suppressed for so many years. I just don't know what that looks like yet. And that's okay. Yeah, it is okay. There's no hurry. Question. Do I need to take another break from my mother so I'm not still subjected to the brainwashing? Is there any value in that? Don't know. Up to you. Depends on these questions, and only you can answer them. Can you just observe her behaviors, in your case, count them, without being dragged down by them? Can you limit your time with her? Can you take a break if you get overwhelmed? Can you go home? Whatever. I don't know what the answers are to these questions, but the questions will help you make a decision. You said, I know you love me. I just got scared that you wouldn't now that I could see more of me. This is old news anyway. Piece of cake. By the way, you say, I also know that I did most of this stuff to my kids too, so you'll be having this conversation with my kids in years to come. I'm sure. I look forward to it. We managed to screw up one generation after another. We all do it. This lady says, my husband has been numbed out for the last 2 years since his father passed away. At this time, he has no relationship with his mother. And when he speaks about her, it's just laced with pain and anger. He is also currently not speaking with one of his brothers, who has consistently thrown him and his other siblings under the bus in order to get their mother's approval. Very unloving family. Yeah, I can only imagine how many wounds he's suffered over the years. You said he's angry all the time, isn't motivated to do much. When he does decide to do things, his focus is on what needs to be done around the house, and he works himself up into a frenzy about finances. Never seems to be enough money or time in his mind. He's been seeing a counselor off and on for the last couple of months, but I haven't seen any change. He's still angry and stressed 24/7. He obviously has nothing to give to me emotionally, and we haven't had sex for like 3 months now, which isn't all that unusual. When I've asked if he would like to, he begrudgingly agrees. There's a real turn on, isn't it? Would you like to have sex? Well, I suppose. And it's obvious that he feels like he's doing me a favor. Needless to say, I don't ask anymore because I'm also empty and I take his response personally. This guy is consumed with pain and anger. And in that condition, the emotional energy needed to have sex would be, or anything else, frankly, have a decent conversation would be overwhelming. If you're interested, just mostly out of curiosity, take a look at his computer. And, it's very possible that he's a porn addict because he probably still has sexual needs. It'd just be a very common thing. You wouldn't beat him up about it. It's just something to know. You said this last weekend didn't go so well. We went to breakfast, and upon arriving at the restaurant, I noticed him checking out an attractive lady. So his sexual desires are not dead, which is what I was just talking about. Another indication that he might be finding an outlet with porn, but not a certainty. It's just very common these days. My goodness. I just don't even ask guys if they're using porn. I ask them how much. You said I went right into victim and attacking because I'm empty, and then that made me feel worse because he never sees me. We left, no breakfast, went home. He became hostile and sullen in the vehicle and told me he was done. At this point, I would normally have reacted, since talking about divorce is something pretty serious. Instead, I was calm, still acting like a victim though, and said, okay, if that's what you need. He didn't get the reaction that he was looking for. This guy's screaming in pain, and nobody is helping him. You don't mean to, dear, but you're making it much worse for him. Your reactions are understandable to his behavior, but they're also unloving, which is the opposite of what he needs. No blaming here. I'm just describing what you're telling me. You said we made it home and he started drinking. I went to check and see if he wanted some breakfast, and he looked horribly sad. I sat down and touched him and told him that he looked like he was sad. Was there anything I could do? He started crying, and all he wanted to do was talk to his brother that he still has a relationship with, as opposed to the one he's thrown away. I got his brother on the phone, just sat quietly with my hand on his back as he sobbed to his brother about how much he missed their dad. Now, it would be really tempting to go and offer sympathy here, but rarely are people grieving for what they lost. They tend to grieve for what they wish they had. So I asked the person who's writing this, I'm talking to you guys now, the ones on the video chat. So I asked, did he actually have a great relationship with his father before his father died? Because it's very common for people to grieve over the fantasy of a possible relationship, not the loss of the actual relationship, because the family sounds so miserable. Not speaking to his mom, not speaking to his brother. She answered in a separate email. Their relationship was far from loving. His father was less unloving than his mother, but he was impatient and used fear to get what he wants. He used to hit my husband when he was a child in the back of the head all the time if he thought he did something stupid. And even when my husband was an adult, He used to slap him in the back of the head. Ooh, what a family. You say, I felt sad seeing how much hurt was inside of him and knowing that I also helped contribute to his pain. After they got off the phone and he ate a little bit, he took a nap. And then when he woke up, apologized for his behavior, and I apologized. At this point, I'm making calls and going to a group on Sunday. It's helped tremendously, but I'm still far from being full. So what suggestions would you have for me to do when he gets ugly with his words like he did when he brought up divorce? That was done because he knows it would hurt me, and I don't feel like being his verbal punching bag. At this point, honey, you're married to a guy who's depressed and angry, and it's not like his father died last week. His father died 2 years ago. So he's just using this as an excuse. He is not depressed about the loss of his father, who hits him in the back of the head. And you're empty too. So it's going to take more than a book. Get a coach. Do something. Ask your coach if they do interventions. Your husband said he's done. That's a pretty big clue that half measures aren't going to be sufficient here. It's time to actually do something. When you're suffering from a heart attack, you don't take aspirin. It sounds like you're at that point. I'm going to do this later. Don't know why. This writer says, I would like to talk to you about an important decision. I think I've grown a lot in real love, but there are moments that are difficult for me. I've been married for 3 years, and I'm 39. My husband is 33. We don't have children. I've learned from real love that in order to be happy, I should be loving to my husband and should not expect anything from him. I understand it, and I'm applying it. He is not so loving, and he hides things from me. He's not close to me. He doesn't talk to me. He doesn't touch me. He doesn't think of me when he makes decisions. He's completely selfish. And in fact, when I make decisions, when he makes them by himself, that's one thing. If I make a decision by myself, then he blows up and gets angry. But I stay with him. We have no children. He's all I have. I have enough time for him, and if he doesn't do something, then I just pick up the ball and do it for him without criticizing him. But now I have a critical decision to make. Should I have children or not? Problems with having children include, number one, this is still you writing, it makes me so busy that I will not have enough time for my husband, and I cannot be as loving to him as I am now, and our relationship could be damaged. It's very likely that, when you have a child, you're not even going to believe how much time that takes. So if he's demanding of your time now, it's going to get way worse. He already acts like a child, gets mad if you make any decisions, doesn't touch you, doesn't talk to you, acts like a brat. And if you then start spending time with a child, it's going to turn into a competition between him and the kid. He's going to become increasingly demanding. So if you don't have a healthy relationship, having a child is not the way to create a bond between you. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Our marriage was awful, so we thought we'd have a child to bring us together. Raise a herd of alpacas. That would be way easier. You say, my husband has strange ideas about raising a child, and I'm not sure if he can be a good father. We often have different ideas, but I can always find a way to avoid conflicts and be loving to him. Are you hearing the pattern of your speech with this guy? If he doesn't do things, you pick up for him. If he gets mad, you let him. If he does nothing around the house, then you do it for him. If you make a decision, he gets mad and you just take it. I'm not saying that there's no loving in this. I'm sure that there is some loving on your part, but whoa, you just sound like a prisoner. It just sounds like a horrible situation. You two aren't partners at all. You say, with a child, we have to make clear decisions, and I'm afraid it will not be possible to come to a definite one that we both agree, and then I don't know what to do. Oh, you couldn't be more right about that. There are a lot of things in life. What to have for dinner you can work out. But with children, there are things that have to be done right now and consistently. And if you two disagree about everything, there isn't time to go to the United Nations to settle the dispute every time you don't know what to do with a kid. It's a potential source of conflict that has to be considered before you bring a child into this home. You clearly tiptoe around him. That's the tone of your entire letter. You're afraid of him. You're afraid of your own husband, and you're going to bring a child into that environment. In that environment, children will be unhappy. Not only are they unhappy in an environment of conflict and constant tiptoeing, they then become additional sources of conflict. You say, but he says he wants children. Meaningless. It's just words. He wants children like 7-year-olds say, Daddy, I want a puppy. It would be cute for a little while, and since he's already a dictatorial man, makes all the decisions, gets mad if you make any decisions, the biggest reason he'd want a child is so he could have somebody else to control. In fact, to control more thoroughly. You can tell a 3-year-old to do anything and scare them and they'll do it. This would be a disaster. If you have children, he will poison them with his anger and his controlling, and you even more. So it's your call whether you have children, but you need to understand that his selfishness is almost certain to increase as he competes with the kid for your time. Kids do interfere with what adults want. And he's going to take it out on them, them if you have more than one, and you. If you decide not to have kids, you'll be sparing them the conflict that sounds virtually inevitable. And if he leaves you, you'll be sparing that endless conflict too. And then she went on and on and on about problems with, additional potential problems with having children. There wasn't a single piece of evidence that pointed toward a child being able to be raised in a loving environment in this home. So, darling, every word you have spoken says, your mouth, I'm not interpreting it. Every word that you've spoken says that bringing a child into this family would just be a terrible idea for you guys right now. You may want to try it. I have no right to disagree, but just, it sounds like a impending disaster. My husband, new writer, was asking me about a work issue where I was having problems, and I was in the middle of answering it when some other driver was rude and my husband shouted something out the window. And then when he brought his head back in the window, he changed the subject, completely ignoring what I'd been saying in the first place. My feelings were hurt. So what do? He just got distracted. And I'm guessing that he does that a lot. In subsequent emails, she said, yeah, he does it all the time. You can't just hope that that will change. When somebody gets distracted easily, what they're saying is they don't really care that much about any one thing that they're doing. Life becomes kind of an entertaining video game. They go from shooting one vampire on the screen to the other. Don't really care that much about any of them. You have to tell him what you need, which is not the same as controlling what he does. Example. You would just say, one example, Fred, I need to talk to you about something that's important to me. I'm not asking you to do anything or change anything, and I'm not criticizing you. I am telling you that I am telling you what I need, and I don't think you're aware of it. When I talk, you often ignore what I'm saying, or you change the subject, or you're distracted, like when we were in the car the other day. When I speak, I need you to focus on me. And from now on, instead of being heard about it, which is stupid, I will point it out to you in the moment. I should have said something before now, instead of letting negative feelings build up. End quote. So, see how there's no accusation. There's just a request. There's just information. In some couples, the person who's speaking says, I can't see that you're paying attention to me. I think it was last week, in fact, that I talked about one way to do it is that it doesn't count as speaking to your partner unless you're looking at their eyes, which is why with little kids, we often say, look at me, look at me. I did that in emergency rooms often when I had a patient that was just panicked. They needed help but they weren't hearing anything I was saying. So I would take them by the shoulders and say, look at me. Look into my eyes. Listen to what I'm saying. And then they could start to listen. People don't realize that they're doing that when their heads are spinning and they go off on tangents. Here's a woman who's talking about an assignment in the 40-day marriage workbook. Apparently it says something like, choose at least 2 issues about which you've criticized your partner, causing any tension in your relationship, and use the guidelines that are written in a number of places. Is it any of my business? Does it really matter? Am I being unconditionally loving? And is he capable of hearing what I'm about to say? And then you say, I have asked my husband, Fred, numerous times, not to put items from a dirty kitchen work service onto my plate or cutting board because I don't like eating off unclean dishes. So let's use the criteria. You say, is it any of my business? Yes. It's not hygienic. It's inconvenient to rewash the items before I use them. You're doing good so far. It is your business because it affects you. Then you say, does it really matter? You say, no. When I'm impatient or critical, it makes Fred feel uncomfortable and less than. It's not worth the price of ruining our relationship, which is what I've been doing. Wrong. You're trying to be nice. Actually, you're trying to avoid conflict. You're fearful. That's what you're really doing. It does matter. You're a hostage instead of a wife. You do get to have things clean. Donna's way cleaner than I am. Washes things way more than I would. But it matters to her. Well, then it matters to me. And I don't get to say, well, just stop that. It doesn't really matter. Yeah, you do get to have things clean. Your mistake is that you get irritated because you've asked him so many times before. You either avoid the conflict by just sucking it up, but you don't. It's affecting you. Or you get irritated. And actually, you get irritated because you've been sucking it up for a long time. And then finally, you explode. So you simply ask again. When he puts something on your plate, you say, Fred, please don't put dirty things on my plate or cutting board or wherever. Whatever your standards are, you get to have your standards of cleanliness. Yours. So you just ask again. But you ask as though it were the first time. No impatience. This is the 65th time well, that's not going to go well. Let him remember that you've asked before. No anger. You get to ask. Then the next one, am I being unconditionally loving? And you answered, strangely, no, I'm not. I'm thinking about how it affects me. I was just having an OCD moment, for those of you who don't know what that means, obsessive compulsive disorder moment. Wrong again, honey. You get to be OCD. Donna's way cleaner than I am. I don't even care to characterize it, whether it's OC or not. She likes clean. Food drops on the floor. I figure it adds color and character to it. She drops food on the floor. She does not eat that food. She gets to have that as her standard. In fact, if she's serving a meal to both of us, she gets to have the standard of throwing it away. What does it affect me if she cooks something new or gives me something clean? Now, if I'm by myself and I drop something on the floor and pick it up and eat it, she doesn't have a right to tell me, oh, you can't eat that. She gets to have standards for her. And if we're eating together, for us, because she's serving the meal. So you've really made yourself a hostage. You haven't meant to, but you're putting up with stuff you don't have to. You say, what is a few moments washing the dishes again compared to the effects I'm having on my relationship with Fred? Except that you're training him to be inconsiderate. You're training him to be lazy and thoughtless. You don't mean to, but you're training him, and he's training you to be a hostage. Come to think of it, what harm will a few less than perfectly clean dishes do to me? You've already said you don't like unclean dishes. That's enough. What effect will it have on you? It will build resentment. You'll say that it won't, but it will. You made it really clear that that's your preference. You say, now I'm being an obsessive control freak. Oh, honey, you're not. He's convinced you that you're being an obsessive control freak. You get to have clean stuff. He's not telling you what food to like, or he's not. This isn't just a preference. This is a way you have to live. Clean. And you get to choose that way. It's only a minor thing, you say, and I've let it destroy my happiness and in turn Fred's. I choose to let it go. It's not worth the price of a clean plate. You missed the point. You get to have standards, and you just need to repeat them to him. But it's about the delivery. It's not making the request. It's because you save it up, and buck up, and think you can take it, and when finally you can't take it anymore, you cut his head off. That is the problem, not liking things to be clean. So, fun being with you all, again, as always. Great questions, as always. Please keep sending them. There's no shortage of them. And we'll see you in a week.